just because it's something that people are often wondering about. We probably all know, right? Not for a long time is the answer to that question. Especially these are 101 classes, so a lot of these dogs have no prior training. They're definitely not ready 3 weeks in to just stop using treats. But that's not something everyone's aware of. So I like to go over that a little bit. We go more in depth on this in the intermediate level classes where we actually start the process of feeding treats for really solid behaviors like sit at that point. But I just kind of take this opportunity to let people know your dog's doing great, even if they can't do it without a treat. That's normal. And I tell them, you know, don't worry too much about this yet, but I want to talk about some things we can do to prepare for feeding treats later. So, and I also go over what are the risks of feeding treats too soon, right? There's 2 main ones that I like to cover. Anything pop into mind for you guys as far as like risks? What can happen if we feed our treats too soon?
Recall drops.
Sorry?
Recall just drops.
Yeah, yep, you're like,
The behavior like falls apart.
or any behavior, right? They just all of a sudden they're like, not motivated to do that anymore. That's a really big one. Probably the most common one is just lack of motivation. Your dog's motivation for that skill can decrease. And there's another one that can happen. Anyone have an idea?
I feel like when people stop using treats as like a reward for a cue, they get frustrated and then they end up bribing their dogs, and then you get this like vicious cycle of like
That can happen too, yeah.
bribing the dog instead of rewarding the
Yeah, that's a really great point to bring up too. Sometimes that will happen. They will, you know, try to go without treats, and then the dog can't do it, and then we're like, okay, well, you got to get your treat back out and help them out. And that's a normal part of the process. Sometimes you're going to try going to a next step of something and realize you need to take a step back. But if that happens a lot, that's where dogs will learn to hold out for that treat, right? If they're like, if I just don't do it, my owner's going to take out and show me the treat. So it's totally fine to be showing dogs a treat when we're first teaching those skills, but that's where one of the things we're going to talk about is really helpful. Trying to shift to where the reward's coming after and we're using the marker as quickly as the dog can, right? So once the dog understands that behavior, I want to shift to marking and rewarding after instead of having that treat in front of their face first. So we're going to talk about that. Another thing I like to warn people about is the dog can get confused, right? This happened to Ferris when we did our first rally trial. You know, we had to practice fading treats to go to a rally. You got to go in the ring and have no treats on you and do the whole course. And there's one sign where they have to sit 4 times in a row. And we went out, we did 3 of the sits, and on the 4th one, he laid down and rolled over because he was confused. He's in his mind, right? He's like, you just asked me to do sit 3 times. I thought I did it right. Maybe that's not what you want. I'm going to try something else. So they can kind of get confused about what the behavior is we're asking for if we're feeding the food before they're really confident that that's what they're doing. So that's another important one, is we want the dog to be confident with the skill before we feed food. Yes. So there are a couple main things that we talk about as far as what can I do now, even though we're not feeding food yet, to prepare my dog to have more success feeding food later. One of those is that 3-step process we talked about in week 1 of mark, then reach for the treat, then reward, right? So try not to just have them in your hand ready to go. Try not to have your hand living in your pouch in between repetitions. A lot of times I like to turn my treat pouch around behind my back. For some people, myself included sometimes, it can help to have a station for your hand in between repetitions. So my hand's in my pocket until after I say yes, and then I reach for my treat. That can be really helpful for people who have a hard time remembering not to just have their hand in the treat pouch all the time. It's instinctive, it's human nature, right? We're all conditioned to be as efficient as possible from the time we go to school, right? So our brains want that ready to go, but that helps a ton, because then your dog's not staring at your hand in the treat pouch or the treats in your hand before doing the behavior. So that's one, mark first, then reach for your treat. Treating every time you mark, I take this as an opportunity to remind people. We always go over that when we intro marker training, right? That's another reason I like to cover this topic, is to give people some reminders. People, just like dogs, learn through repetition. So this gives us a chance to give them the information again, but without kind of being patronizing, right? Like, I'm just gonna tell you this again because you guys aren't doing it right. So making sure every time you mark, you follow with a treat. That's super important for your dog to have a strong understanding of what's expected in the behavior. And, you know, we we all know that. If that marker becomes inconsistent, then the dog starts to become less responsive to the marker and feel less confident with the behaviors they're doing. And then the last one is kind of what we mentioned earlier that Nicole was talking about, is once your dog starts to understand the skill, making sure you're marking and rewarding after. And I like to do that with my treats not on my body when we get a basic understanding of that behavior.
Good boy.
So if my dog is starting to get sit, you know, all the time, there's one phase, right? Treat in the hand on the dog's nose is that first phase. Once my dog's getting that, I will often kind of pretend to have a treat. Lure the behavior, yes, and reach for my treat and deliver it to your dog. And I like to practice that. Once you get to that stage where you can do that, it doesn't have to be much beyond that. You can practice with your food off your body. So I put my treats up here, lure my sit with my fake treat, yes, and reach for my treat and reward my dog. Some dogs will need to toggle back and forth there. Some dogs will realize right away, oh, you don't have to have the treat in your hand for me to get it. Other dogs will be like, wait, you didn't have a treat, not sure I want to do it the next time. So some dogs will need to go back and forth where you use the treat a few times and then you pretend to have a treat. And then you go back to using a real treat a few times to lure, and then you pretend to have a treat. And you can slowly make that shift. Other dogs can make that transition really quickly and understand, oh, the treats are right there and I'm just gonna get them after. So practicing with the food off of your body, making sure to mark and then get your treat out. All of that helps for